Hi, welcome to example 2 we're looking at a flowchart as a way to show the qualitative analysis separation of ions in a solution. Just like in the first example you just been watching, the first thing we want to do is still create this little table, little chart off to the side here to show our thinking before we go ahead and use a flowchart. So we've got those three ions, the Ag+, the Ba2+, and the Be2+ ions that we're looking through, and we've got 5 different options for the anions that we could add to try and precipitate. So the OH-, the Cl, SO4, 2-, CO3, 2-, and the S2- ion. And using your solubility table, you're looking at those to figure out would you or not get a precipitate or not, and then you can fill that table in as you start to think about the options that you can use. Silver with the hydroxide would form a precipitate, as does the barium and also the beryllium. In terms of the chlorine with the silver, that also forms a precipitate, but the barium doesn't this time, and neither does the beryllium. The sulfate also forms a precipitate with the silver, but also with the barium, but not with the beryllium. Carbonate forms a precipitate with all three. And for the sulfide, only again forms a precipitate with the silver, but not with the other two. So now that we've figured out what will and will not form a precipitate, we can start to think about creating that flow chart to show what we're doing. So to start with the flow chart, we would list our 3 ions we have in the solution at the top. So we've got those coming through. And in our flowchart, we can show just a line coming down. And what we want to do here now is decide what it is we're going to add. So we've got the 3 of them in the solution. What can we add to try and precipitate just the one out? And from our little chart here, we can see that we could choose either the chloride or the sulfide ion to add that precipitate just the silver out. That's the only one that we've got that precipitates just one of them to begin with. So again, off to the right then, branch that down. We can add a step 1, and we would add 1 molar, and we could choose either chloride or the sulfide. So if we choose the sulfide, for example, in this case, we could add 1 molar of Na2S, sodium sulfide. And we'd need to add that in, and when we do that, it would form our precipitate of the silver sulfide solid, and that's out. And then for the rest of it, then we can follow coming off to the left here. We've now still got our barium and our beryllium ions. Again, now we can come back down. Well, what's our second solution that we may be wanting to add to get rid of one of those two? Well, we already got rid of our sulfur now. And so we can think about the silver's gone. So putting our line through those, what have we got left? Well, we want barium and beryllium. We want something that'll precipitate one, but not the other, as we're looking through those. And so when we look through, well, the hydroxide won't work because it would precipitate both. Chloride wouldn't work, it won't precipitate either. We've already used the sulfide, so we know that's out of our list of things to use. And carbonate precipitates both, so no good. So we're left with the only option this time is to add the sulfate, which would precipitate out the barium. So again, we're going to add the sulfate, and again 1 molar, and again, just to make it easy, keep sticking with sodium. That's the nice easy one to go with, so you don't get confused. Na2SO4 this time. And as we saw, this is going to precipitate out the barium, even as our barium sulfate precipitate it out. filtering that off, and that's leaving us with just our beryllium left in our solution. So then our final separation, number 3, we could choose either hydroxide or carbonate. That's what's left over now, and that's what will help us get rid of the beryllium. As the beryllium's gone, so we can use either hydroxide or carbonate. So let's just go ahead and use the sodium hydroxide this time. And add 1 molar sodium hydroxide. And this will leave us with the beryllium hydroxide solid that we could filter out from the solution there. So similar thing through. So again, even if we're using the flowchart can be added in rather than a lot of the steps individually. You can use that to put the information in, but you're still going to need to create a little table off to the side to show and explain your thinking as to why you're adding what you're adding as you're going through. Remember, when we're adding, always want a 1 molar solution, and we need the full compound. So what is the other ion? If we're adding sulfide like in number 1, add sodium sulfide, adding the compound that we're looking for. Hopefully that helps explain the flowchart one to you a little bit better, and good luck as you go through the practice.